The first thing everyone saw was the wheelchair. Not Staff Sergeant Mike Torres, not his Purple Heart, not the Ranger tab on his physical therapy uniform, or the 75th Regiment scroll tattooed on his forearm. Just the wheelchair. At Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, the hospital where America's wounded warriors came to heal, Mike Torres worked as a physical therapist, 38 years old. Paralyzed from the waist down. Wheelchair user for 6 years since an IED in Afghanistan's Helmand province had taken both his legs below the knee and ended his career with the 75th Ranger Regiment. Now he helped other wounded warriors learn to walk again, or accept they never would. He taught them exercises, showed them adaptive techniques, listened to their anger and grief and fear about futures that looked nothing like the lives they'd planned. But when the young soldiers looked at him, they saw the chair first. Always the chair. Private Danny Mitchell, 22 years old, fresh from losing his right leg to an IED in Syria 3 weeks ago, sat on the therapy table with his arms crossed. His prosthetic leg, still new, still uncomfortable, rested against the wall. He was scheduled for his first full physical therapy session with Mike. He wasn't happy about it. "You're my therapist?" Danny asked, looking at Mike's wheelchair with barely concealed contempt. "Yes, Private," Mike said calmly, wheeling closer. "I'm Staff Sergeant Torres. I'll be working with you on—" "You can't help me." Mike paused. He'd heard this before, heard it from dozens of young wounded warriors, but it never got easier. "I understand you're frustrated, Private Mitchell," Mike said, keeping his voice professional, "but I'm here to help you adapt to your prosthetic and regain—" "You're disabled," Danny interrupted. His voice was flat, brutal. "You can't help me. You're in a wheelchair. You can't walk. You can't fight. How are you supposed to teach me to be a soldier again?" The physical therapy gym went quiet. Other wounded warriors, Marines missing limbs, soldiers with traumatic brain injuries, airmen with burns covering half their bodies, stopped their exercises to watch. Mike looked at Danny, at the anger, at the fear beneath it that he recognized because he'd felt it too, 6 years ago, when he'd woken up in a hospital bed and realized his legs were gone. This kid wasn't angry at Mike. He was angry at the universe, at the IED that had taken his leg, at the future that looked broken, at himself for surviving when brothers hadn't. Mike knew that anger intimately. "You're right," Mike said quietly. "I can't walk. I can't run. I lost both legs below the knee in Helmand province in 2018. My career as a Ranger ended the day that IED went off." Danny's expression shifted slightly, like he hadn't expected honesty. "So yeah," Mike continued, "I'm disabled. I use a wheelchair. I can't do a lot of things I used to do." He paused. "But I'm still here. I'm still serving, and I'm still a Ranger. The wheelchair doesn't change that." "A Ranger?" Danny laughed bitterly. "Come on, man. Rangers aren't disabled. Rangers are elite. Rangers are whole." His voice cracked on that last word. Mike understood. Danny wasn't just talking about Mike anymore. He was talking about himself, about the leg he'd lost, about feeling broken and useless and less than what he'd been. "Rangers adapt," Mike said. "That's what we do. We find a way to complete the mission regardless of circumstances. Losing your legs, or my legs, doesn't change the training, doesn't erase the mindset." "That's bullshit," Danny said. "You can't fight from a wheelchair. You can't deploy. You can't do anything a real soldier does. No offense, but look at yourself. You're broken." The word hung in the air. Broken. Mike had thought that same thing for the first 2 years after his injury. Had looked at himself in the mirror and seen someone shattered, someone less than. Someone who'd stopped being a warrior the day the explosion took his legs. It had taken him years to understand that he'd been wrong. "I'm not broken, Private," Mike said quietly. "I'm adapted. There's a difference." "Yeah?" Danny's voice was challenging. "Prove it. Show me what a guy in a wheelchair can do that's worth anything." Mike could have argued, could have explained, could have tried to convince this angry kid that disability didn't equal inability. But in Mike's experience, some lessons couldn't be taught with words. They had to be demonstrated. "Tell you what," Mike said, "let's start your therapy session. Work with me for 1 hour. If you still think I can't help you, We'll request a different therapist fare? Danny shrugged. Whatever, man. But this is a waste of time. Mike nodded and began setting up the therapy equipment, ignoring the pitying looks from the other wounded warriors in the gym. He didn't tell Danny about the 3 combat deployments before the injury. Didn't mention the 57 missions with the 75th Ranger Regiment. Didn't explain that he'd been one of the best point men in his company, first through every door, the one who took the most risk because that's what Rangers did. He just did his job. Because in 4 hours and 27 minutes, when armed terrorists breached Walter Reed's security with the intent to take wounded warriors hostage and send a message to America, Danny Mitchell was going to learn exactly what a Ranger in a wheelchair could do. He was going to learn that the wheelchair was just a tool. The warrior was still intact. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Army Story so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? And to our disabled veterans, we see you, we honor you, and you are not broken. Mike Torres had been dismissed 47 times since he'd started working at Walter Reed 2 years ago. He kept count. Not out of bitterness exactly, more like a clinical observation. A data point that proved something he already knew. People saw the wheelchair first and made their judgments before he ever opened his mouth. "Morning, Mike," Captain Sarah Chen, another physical therapist, said as she entered the gym. She was able-bodied, former Air Force, never deployed. The wounded warriors treated her with respect. "Morning, Sarah. I heard about your new patient, Danny Mitchell, fresh amputee, angry." "They're all angry at first," Mike said. "Yeah, but..." Sarah hesitated. "Maybe I should take him. I mean, no offense, but sometimes the new ones do better with therapists who, who can walk," Mike finished. "I was going to say, who haven't experienced the same trauma, so they don't see their potential future in their therapist." It was a diplomatic way of saying Mike reminded the wounded warriors of what they feared becoming, but Mike appreciated that she tried to be kind about it. "I can handle him," Mike said. "I know you can. I just thought..." "I've got this, Sarah. Thanks." She nodded and moved to her own patient, a young Marine who'd lost an arm, who immediately smiled at her and engaged in the therapy because she represented what he wanted to be again: whole, capable, normal. Mike wheeled over to where Danny Mitchell sat, still sulking on the therapy table. "All right, Private, let's get started. I want you to stand using your prosthetic..." "Why should I listen to you?" Danny interrupted. "You can't even stand yourself." An Army specialist 2 tables over, Jenkins, bilateral leg amputee, been at Walter Reed for 4 months, spoke up. "Mitchell, shut up and do the work." "Why?" Danny shot back. "So I can end up like him?" He gestured at Mike. "In a wheelchair for the rest of my life? No thanks." Jenkins' face darkened. "Staff Sergeant Torres is one of the best therapists here. You'd be lucky to learn from him." "He's disabled," Danny said flatly. "How's he supposed to teach me anything?" The gym went quiet again. This was the second time today Danny had voiced what others only thought. Mike took a slow breath. 6 years of this. 6 years of being the example of what wounded warriors feared most: permanent disability. The wheelchair they might end up in if therapy didn't work, the future that terrified them. "Private Mitchell," Mike said, his voice still calm despite the anger building in his chest. "I understand you're processing a lot right now, but you need to decide. Do you want to get better or do you want to stay angry?" "I want to walk," Danny said, "not roll." The words hit harder than Danny probably intended, because Mike wanted that too. Wanted it every single day. Wanted to stand on his own legs, walk into rooms without people staring, exist without the constant reminder of what he'd lost. But wanting didn't change reality. "Then let's work on your prosthetic," Mike said, "so you can walk." "While you sit there in your chair," Danny muttered. Mike's hands tightened on his wheelchair's armrests, but he said nothing, because arguing wouldn't help. Getting angry wouldn't teach Danny anything. Only time would show the kid that disability wasn't the end. Mike just wished he didn't have to prove it over and over and over. Helmand Province, Afghanistan, 2018, 6 years ago. Staff Sergeant Mike Torres, 32 years old, 75th Ranger Regiment, 2nd Battalion, moved through the Taliban compound with the fluid precision of someone who'd done this hundreds of times. Point man, first through every door, the position that took the most risk and required the most skill. Clear! Mike's voice was sharp, professional, as he moved through the first room of the compound. His team flowed behind him, 4 Rangers moving like a single organism. This was their 57th mission together. 57 times they'd walked into hostile territory and walked back out. Not because of luck, because of training, because of teamwork, because of Mike Torres leading from the front. His legs were his weapons, strong, fast, carried him up walls, over obstacles, through terrain that broke lesser soldiers. Those legs had run the Darby Queen obstacle course at Fort Benning, had carried him through the brutal physical requirements of Ranger School, had never failed him in 3 combat deployments. Room 2, his team leader called. Mike stacked on the next door, breached, moved through with explosive speed. Clear! This was what Mike Torres was built for. This was what he'd trained his entire adult life to do. This was who he was at his core, a Ranger elite, capable, whole. They moved through the compound room by room, standard high-value target raid. Intelligence suggested Taliban leadership in the area. The Rangers were there to capture or kill. Compound clear, Mike announced after they'd swept all the rooms. Moving to exfil. They headed toward the extraction point, a street 200 meters away where their vehicles waited. Mike took point again, because that's what he did. That's who he was. He never saw the pressure plate. One step. His boot pressed down on something that gave slightly beneath his weight. In the fraction of a second before the explosion, Mike understood exactly what was happening. IED pressure activated. He'd just triggered it. Time to think, fuck. Time to react, none. Then the world became light and heat and pressure that wasn't sound, but force that hit like a wall. Mike felt himself flying backward, felt the impact of hitting the ground, felt his ears ringing and his vision white, felt nothing below his knees. He looked down, saw where his legs had been, understood in one crystal clear moment of terrible lucidity that everything had changed. His team was screaming, medic running toward him, tourniquets being applied, hands pressing on wounds, voices shouting into radios for medevac. Mike stared at his legs, at the damage, at the end of everything he'd been. Stay with me, Mike. His team leader's face appeared above him. Stay awake. Medevac is 2 minutes out. My legs, Mike heard himself say, voice distant, shocked. They're gone. You're alive. That's what matters. Stay with me. But lying there in the Afghan dirt, watching his blood pool around what remained of his legs, Mike Torres wasn't sure being alive mattered. Because the Ranger, the elite warrior who moved first through every door, had just died. What came after was just survival. Mike blinked away the memory. 6 years later, and it still came back. Usually in the quiet moments, the therapy sessions where young wounded warriors reminded him of who he'd been before the chair. Danny Mitchell was standing now, if you could call it that, wobbling on his new prosthetic, frustrated, angry, about to fall. Easy, Mike said, wheeling closer. Plant your weight on your good leg first. The prosthetic takes time to... I know, Danny snapped. I'm not stupid. I didn't say you were. I'm trying to help you. Danny took a step, lost his balance, started to fall. Mike moved fast. 6 years in a wheelchair had taught him speed and precision. He caught Danny before he hit the ground, steadying him with hands that were far stronger than people expected. Let go of me! Danny shoved Mike's hands away. I don't need help from a cripple. The word echoed through the gym. Cripple. Mike had been called worse, had heard every variation of the slurs. Usually from people who didn't know better, sometimes from wounded warriors who were projecting their own fears. But it still stung. Sit down, Private, Mike said quietly. That's enough for today. Good, Danny said, because you're useless anyway. Mike wheeled away before he said something he'd regret. Rolled past the other therapists who'd heard everything and were carefully not making eye contact. Past the other wounded warriors who looked at him with pity. He made it to the supply closet before the anger hit him fully. 6 years of this. 6 years of being dismissed, disrespected, treated like he had nothing to offer because his legs didn't work anymore. Mike looked down at his wheelchair, at the legs that were gone, at the disability that defined how everyone saw him. Maybe Danny was right. Maybe Mike couldn't help anyone. Maybe being a wounded warrior didn't make him qualified to heal other wounded warriors. Maybe the wheelchair did make him useless. Then the alarm sounded, a harsh, urgent blaring that Mike had never heard before in 2 years at Walter Reed. And a voice over the intercom, tight with panic. "Security alert! Armed intruders in the building. All personnel shelter in place. This is not a drill." The physical therapy gym erupted in chaos. 30 wounded warriors, some on crutches, some in wheelchairs, some barely mobile, all trying to move toward exits that the security protocols were automatically locking. "Everyone stay calm," Captain Sarah Chen shouted, but her voice was drowned out by the screaming. Mike's training kicked in immediately. 6 years in a wheelchair hadn't erased 12 years of military conditioning. His mind shifted into tactical mode automatically. Assessment. Armed intruders. Location unknown. Building on lockdown. Exit sealed. Assets. 30 wounded warriors, most with limited mobility. 4 civilian therapists with no combat training. Threats. Unknown number of hostiles. Unknown weapons. Unknown objectives. Solution. Defend this position until security arrives. Mike wheeled toward the gym's main door, the one that locked from the inside. His hands moved with practiced efficiency despite the adrenaline lock engaged. Door secured. "Windows!" Mike shouted. "Someone close the blinds! Now!" A Marine Corporal, Wilson, missing his left arm, moved to comply. "What's happening?" Danny Mitchell's voice, suddenly young and scared. "Are we under attack?" "Yes," Mike said simply. "And this gym has 30 wounded warriors who can't run." He pulled out his phone, tried to call hospital security. Line was busy. He sent a text instead. "PT gym secured. 30+ wounded. Need backup." Then through the door, Mike heard gunfire. Not training, not a drill. Real automatic weapons fire. In Walter Reed. In the hospital where America's wounded warriors were supposed to be safe. "Oh God," Sarah Chen whispered. "They're coming here." Mike looked around the gym, at Danny Mitchell frozen with fear, barely able to stand on his new prosthetic, at Specialist Jenkins, bilateral amputee, wheelchair user like Mike, at Marine Corporal Wilson with one arm, at the other 27 wounded warriors, all of them injured, many of them barely mobile. None of them could fight. None of them could run. None of them could defend themselves. Except Mike looked down at his wheelchair, at his hands, at the training that hadn't been in his legs, had been in his mind the whole time. Rangers don't quit. Rangers adapt. "Listen up!" Mike's voice cut through the panic. Sharp, command authority from 12 years of military service. "Everyone away from the door. Wheelchairs form a perimeter. Ambulatory patients behind them. Use whatever furniture you can move as barriers." They stared at him. "Now!" Ranger voice. The voice that made people jump. They moved. "What are you doing?" Sarah Chen demanded. "We're supposed to shelter in place and wait for security." "Security might not get here in time," Mike said, already moving. His wheelchair spun with precision, surveying the gym. "We need to defend this position." "Defend it? We're physical therapists. These are patients." "These are soldiers," Mike corrected. "Wounded, yes, but still soldiers. And I'm a ranger. Wounded, yes, but still a ranger." He wheeled to the equipment storage, started pulling out anything that could be used defensively. Parallel bars could block the door. Weight machines could provide cover. Medicine balls could be thrown as improvised weapons. "Staff Sergeant!" Danny Mitchell's voice was shaking. I can't fight. I can barely stand." Mike looked at the kid who'd called him a cripple 20 minutes ago, who'd said Mike was useless. "You don't need to stand to fight, Private," Mike said. "You just need to refuse to quit." More gunfire outside, closer this time. Voices shouting in a language Mike recognized. Arabic. His mind cataloged the information. Multiple shooters. Coordinated attack. targeting the wounded warriors specifically. This is terrorism. "Jenkins," Mike called to the bilateral amputee specialist. "You're in a wheelchair like me. Cover the right flank. If anyone comes through that door, you throw anything you can grab at their heads. Blind them long enough for me to get an angle." "An angle for what?" Jenkins asked. "We don't have weapons." "We have wheelchairs," Mike said. "And if you know how to use one, it's more dangerous than you think." He looked at Danny. "Mitchell, you've got one leg. I've got 0. Wilson's got one arm. Jenkins has no legs. Every person in this room is wounded." "That's my point," Danny said. "We can't fight." "Can't fight standing," Mike corrected. "But warfare isn't just about running and shooting. It's about tactics, about using your terrain, about refusing to give up." The door handle rattled. Someone was trying to get in. "Everyone down!" Mike commanded. The wounded warriors dropped. Some fell badly. Prosthetics awkward, balance poor, but they got down. The door handle rattled again. Then a voice in accented English. "Open this door." Mike wheeled to a position where he could see the door, but had cover from a weight machine. "Corporal Wilson," Mike said quietly, "you see that fire extinguisher?" "Yes, Staff Sergeant." "When I give the signal, you're going to pull the pin and be ready to spray it." "At who?" "At whoever comes through that door," Mike said. His hands were steady on his wheelchair. His breathing was controlled. His mind was clear. 6 years in this chair. 6 years of being dismissed. 6 years of people looking at his disability and deciding he couldn't do anything meaningful. Rangers lead the way, Mike thought, even when they can't walk it. The door exploded inward with a breaching charge, and Staff Sergeant Mike Torres, paralyzed from the waist down, showed 30 wounded warriors and 4 terrorists exactly what a ranger in a wheelchair could do. The breaching charge blew the door off its hinges. Smoke poured into the gym. 2 armed men came through, AK-47s raised, black tactical gear, faces covered, terrorists, professional, moving with military training. "Now!" Mike shouted. Wilson sprayed the fire extinguisher directly into the first terrorist's face. Blinding white CO2. The man stumbled, weapon dropping. Mike moved. 6 years of wheelchair use had made his upper body incredibly strong. He could move fast, faster than people expected. The wheelchair wasn't a limitation. It was a weapon. He rolled forward with explosive speed, rammed the first terrorist with the full force of the chair and his body weight. 200 pounds of man and metal hitting at speed, the terrorist went down hard. Mike didn't hesitate, grabbed the AK-47 from the fallen terrorist's hands, pointed it at the second terrorist. "Drop it!" The second terrorist spun toward Mike, weapon coming up. Mike fired first, 3 shots, center mass. Ranger training from 12 years ago applied from a seated position. The terrorist went down. The gym was silent except for the ringing in everyone's ears. Mike sat in his wheelchair, breathing hard, holding an AK-47, smoke from the gunfire drifting around him. Danny Mitchell stared. You killed them." "I defended us," Mike corrected. He looked at the door. "And there are more coming. Everyone stay down." More gunfire in the hallway. Voices shouting. At least 2 more hostiles. "Staff Sergeant," Jenkins said from his wheelchair. "What do we do?" Mike looked around the gym, at the wounded warriors looking to him for leadership, at the 2 downed terrorists, at the weapon in his hands. Rangers adapt. "Wilson, Jenkins, Mitchell, I need you mobile," Mike said. "Wheelchairs and crutches can block the doorway. Create a barrier. Everyone else stays behind cover." "What are you doing?" Sarah Chen asked. "Taking the fight to them," Mike said. "They expect wounded warriors to be helpless. Easy targets. They don't expect resistance." "You can't go out there," Sarah protested. "You're in a wheelchair." Mike looked at her. "The wheelchair is just how I move, Captain. It doesn't change my training. Doesn't change my duty. And right now, 30 people in this gym need someone to keep those terrorists from getting in." He checked the AK-47. Full magazine. Selector on semi-automatic. "Rangers lead the way," Mike said quietly. Then he wheeled toward the door. Danny Mitchell's voice stopped him. "Staff Sergeant, I'm sorry. For what I said, you're not useless." Mike looked back, at the kid who'd called him a cripple an hour ago, who was seeing for the first time that disability didn't equal inability. "I know, Private," Mike said. "Now help these people build that barrier. That's an order." Then he went through the door, into the hallway, where two more armed terrorists were advancing toward the gym. Mike Torres, paralyzed from the waist down, wheelchair user, former 75th Ranger Regiment, positioned himself in the center of the corridor. The terrorists saw him, a man in a wheelchair. They actually laughed. That was their mistake, because Mike Torres might not have legs anymore. But he still had his training, his tactics, his Ranger mindset, and an AK-47. "Come on," Mike said quietly. They came and learned what a Ranger in a wheelchair could do. The hallway fight lasted 93 seconds. Mike's wheelchair was both his limitation and his advantage. He couldn't run, couldn't take cover quickly, couldn't move vertically, but he could shoot from a stable seated position, could wheel backward faster than people expected, could use corners and doorways tactically. The first terrorist came around the corner firing, wild shots that hit the walls above Mike's head. Mike didn't panic, didn't spray and pray, just aimed with the precision of someone who'd qualified expert with every weapon the Army issued. 2 shots, center mass, down. The second terrorist was smarter, used cover, fired controlled bursts, professional. Mike wheeled backward, using the hallway's corners. His mind calculated angles, cover positions, fields of fire. The same tactical thinking that had made him an elite Ranger, just applied from a wheelchair. The terrorist advanced. Mike waited. Patience. Timing. When the terrorist came around the corner, Mike was ready. 3 shots, head and chest. Down. Silence. Mike sat in his wheelchair in the middle of Walter Reed's hallway, breathing hard, covered in sweat, every muscle in his upper body burning, but alive, and 4 terrorists weren't. His phone buzzed. "Security, where are you? We're clearing the building." Mike, "PT Jim, threats neutralized, 30+ wounded secured." Security, "Did you say neutralized? By who?" Mike, "Physical therapist, former 75th Ranger, wheelchair user." There was a long pause before the response. "What?" Mike almost laughed, because he knew exactly what they were thinking. How did a guy in a wheelchair take down 4 armed terrorists? Same way he'd done everything for 6 years. Adapt, overcome, refuse to quit. He wheeled back toward the gym, pushed through the damaged doorway, faced 30 wounded warriors and 4 civilian therapists who were staring at him like he just performed a miracle. "Building's being cleared," Mike said. "Security is on the way. Everyone okay?" Nobody answered. They just stared. Danny Mitchell broke the silence. "Staff Sergeant, you're bleeding." Mike looked down. His shirt had blood on it. Not his own, from the close quarters fighting, but his hands were cut. His knuckles were bleeding. His wheelchair had dents. "I'm fine," Mike said. "Anyone hurt in here?" "No," Sarah Chen whispered. "But Mike, how did you—" "I'm a Ranger," Mike said simply. "Was a Ranger. Still am a Ranger. The wheelchair doesn't change that." He looked at Danny Mitchell, at the kid who'd said Mike was useless, who'd called him broken. "You asked me to prove what a guy in a wheelchair can do," Mike said. "I think I just answered your question." Danny nodded slowly, tears on his face. "Yes, Staff Sergeant, you did." The aftermath was chaos. Security forces flooded the building. FBI, ATF, military police. The 4 dead terrorists were confirmed as part of a coordinated attack on Walter Reed, an attempt to kill wounded American warriors and send a message about America's weakness. They'd killed 3 security guards, wounded 2 nurses. But they hadn't made it to the wounded warriors, because one paralyzed physical therapist had stopped them. Mike sat in his wheelchair, giving his statement to an FBI agent who kept looking at him like he didn't quite believe what he was hearing. "So you engaged 4 armed terrorists from a wheelchair?" "Yes, ma'am." "And neutralized all 4?" "Yes, ma'am." "Using an AK-47 you took from the first hostile after ramming him with your wheelchair?" "Yes, ma'am." The agent put down her notepad. "Staff Sergeant Torres, I've been with the FBI for 15 years. I've never heard anything like this. I'm a Ranger, ma'am. We adapt. You're also paralyzed. Yes, ma'am. But that just means I can't walk. Doesn't mean I can't fight. She shook her head in amazement. You're going to be famous. You know that, right? I'd rather not be, ma'am. I just want to get back to work. Work? After this? I'm a physical therapist. I've got patients who need help. The agent smiled. Something tells me they're going to listen to you a lot more carefully now. 2 hours later, Mike was back in the physical therapy gym. The door had been replaced. The blood had been cleaned up. The equipment had been straightened. Like nothing had happened, except everything had changed. Danny Mitchell wheeled himself over. He'd borrowed a wheelchair, said he wanted to try it, to understand Mike's perspective. Staff Sergeant Torres, Danny said formally. Permission to speak? You don't have to be formal, Danny. We're in PT, not combat. After what happened, I think I do, Staff Sergeant. Danny took a breath. I want to apologize for everything I said about you being disabled, about you being useless, about, he looked down, about calling you a cripple. You were angry, Mike said, at your situation, at your injury. I understand that. But I took it out on you, the one person who actually understood what I'm going through. Danny met Mike's eyes. You saved my life today, saved all of us. And you did it from a wheelchair. You did it while being paralyzed. I did it while being a Ranger, Mike corrected gently. The paralysis doesn't define me, Danny. It's just a circumstance. The training, the mindset, the refusal to quit, that's what defines me. I see that now, Danny said, and I want to learn from you. Really learn, not just physical therapy, but how to be a warrior even when you're wounded. Mike smiled. That's all I've ever wanted to teach, Private. 3 months later, Private Danny Mitchell stood in the Walter Reed Physical Therapy Gym, walking on his prosthetic leg with confidence. No wobbling, no fear, just steady, determined movement. Mike Torres watched from his wheelchair, arms crossed, smiling with pride. Good, Mike said. Now run. Run? Danny looked skeptical. On this thing? You're a soldier, Danny. Soldiers run, prosthetic or not. Danny took a breath, then started jogging on the treadmill. Awkward at first, then smoother, then actually running. When he finished, he was grinning. I did it. Yes, you did, Mike said. And next week, we're going to work on tactical movement because you're going back to duty. Back to duty? Danny's eyes widened. They're letting me stay in? You're a wounded warrior, not a former warrior, Mike said. There's a difference. The Army needs you, in whatever capacity you can serve. Danny looked at Mike, at the wheelchair, at the man who taught him that disability wasn't the end of service. What about you, Staff Sergeant? Are you going back? Mike smiled. I never left, Private. I'm serving right here, teaching warriors like you that losing a leg, or 2 legs, doesn't mean you stop being a soldier. It just means you adapt. Rangers lead the way, Danny said quietly. Even when we can't walk it, Mike finished. They both smiled, because they understood something that many people never learned. Warriors aren't defined by their bodies. They're defined by their spirit, by their refusal to quit, by their willingness to adapt to any circumstance and still complete the mission. Mike Torres had lost his leg 6 years ago, but he'd never stopped being a Ranger. And now, sitting in his wheelchair in a physical therapy gym, teaching wounded warriors to fight through their injuries and reclaim their lives, he was more of a Ranger than ever. Because Rangers don't just fight battles, they help others fight theirs too. Disability is not inability. A wheelchair is not a prison. Losing your legs doesn't mean losing your warrior spirit. Mike Torres taught an entire hospital full of wounded warriors and 4 terrorists who made a fatal error that adaptation is the ultimate form of strength. The lessons Mike teaches go beyond physical therapy. Your circumstances don't define you, your choices do. Losing something doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're challenged to adapt. The wheelchair was just how Mike moved. The Ranger was always who he was. Respect isn't earned through ability, it's earned through character. To every disabled veteran, every wounded warrior, every person who's been told they're less than because of an injury, You are not broken. You are adapted. Your service didn't end when you got injured. It transformed. If this story moved you, salute in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to Army Story for more military stories that honor all warriors, wounded, whole, and everywhere in between. To our wounded warriors, you are seen, you are valued, you are warriors. The injury changed your body. It didn't change who you are. Until next time, stay strong, adapt to every challenge, and remember, Rangers lead the way, even when they roll it.